course, everybody in this room, I'm sure, knows that the Campaign for Liberty was a spin-off of the Ron Paul campaign, and we support a lot, big proportion of what his career has been about. If there's one signature issue for the Campaign for Liberty, what would that be? Anybody?
And the Fed.
And the Fed. Great. I really don't need to give my talk then, because you're already on that page. But I'm going to anyway. So why is this a signature issue? Why is ending the Fed important? Again, you tell me. All right, everybody's bashful this morning. I'll reiterate what you probably already know.
Banking cartel destroying our currency.
Yeah, okay, it destroys our currency, but beyond that, without the Federal Reserve, we would not have the big government that we have. It's the way that they tax us without letting it be known that it's a tax. They undermine the value of our currency, the way Bill Zeitz had just said. But if they had to tax to send our young people off to war, if they had to tax to redistribute the wealth that they created out of thin air, there'd probably be riots in the street and they wouldn't be able to get away with it. But by accumulating this debt, making us slaves to that debt, and our children even more so, they're able to have this big government. And the big government, of course, it assaults our prosperity and it assaults our liberty. So without the Federal Reserve to fund all of that, we would have a smaller, more frugal government that is doing what it should do, protect our life, liberty, and property, and not a whole lot more. So it's really important. But, you know, the other issue is audit the Fed. And, you know, first we're going to audit it, and people are going to see how rotten and corrupt it is. And I'm sure most of you in the room are aware of the audit last fall that was revealed. It was a one-time limited peek into the belly of the beast. And oh, what corruption and what rottenness was discovered. It turns out that Ben Bernanke reported to Congress, I think it was in late November or early December, that he and his henchmen had created $12.3 trillion out of nothing to give to the biggest banks and Wall Street. Well, not only our biggest banks, but it turned out he gave some to Deutsche Bank, to the Swiss Bank, to the Central Bank of England, the Central Bank of Scotland, and a bunch of other things. But in addition, the Federal Reserve, I can't remember the exact figure, but it was nearly another $1 trillion, went to 35 foreign banks that were private banks. So do we want our taxes going to support? And of course, the Federal Reserve didn't tax us for that money, they just created it, but in a way they taxed us because it made our dollars worth less. So they're tinkering with this, they're destroying the value of the dollar, and in the long run they're accumulating debts that cannot be maintained and will make our prosperity even less. But I think we all knew in a general sense that this kind of thing was going on. You know, that $12.3 trillion, that makes that $850 billion TARP bill look virtually insignificant. But one thing that I found out by way of that audit that I wasn't aware of was that there's a primary dealer's window at the Federal Reserve. If you have a securities firm on Wall Street, you can walk right up to that window and say, hey, I need $100 million. And Ben Bernanke will give it to you. I mean, think about what that does. If they see a trading opportunity, they go get the money to make it happen? Isn't that like insider trading? I just cannot believe that they can do this without there being some level of insider trading that it makes it a bad joke that Martha Stewart ever went to jail for telling a little white lie. And these people are doing it all day, every day. Now the other thing, the stock market's up from where it was, right? They handed out a total of $3.6 trillion to Wall Street, most of it to the biggest 5 firms on Wall Street. 3.1 of the 3.6 went to the biggest 5. Where would the price of stocks be today without that infusion of $3.6 trillion? I dare say the level of stock would be less. But it almost doesn't matter what the nominal price of stocks are, because we could all be millionaires, and what's good is it going to do us if it takes that to buy a loaf of bread? That's where we're headed if this insanity doesn't stop. It's a way that the super rich have their wealth magnified. You know, the left is always talking about the concentration of wealth, and I have no problem with Steve Jobs, you know, creating Apple Computer and getting rich because we in this room are buying the products that he produces. I have no problem with that. But I do have a problem with the fact that the bankers and the people on Wall Street benefit from this legalized counterfeiting, and their stock goes up. You know, the generic term stock, their stock goes up, and the middle class and the poor, well, we continue to get poorer, and businesses are going bankrupt. So it's obviously not working. So I want to remind you again, we need to keep this issue to the fore. We need to have this audit the Fed, and I think we should concentrate on audit first, because both friend and foe say the Federal Reserve will not survive once people know what's going on inside that corrupt organization. So let's push for audit the Fed. Let's let it not let it not fall to the wayside. Now here at the state level, I think we also have another issue that we should make it our cause for the near term anyway, and that is comprehensive voter reform. You know, we saw in the spring elections that election for Supreme Court was almost stolen from us and may still be. And I heard stories when I was down in Milwaukee that I can only shake my head at how obvious the corruption was in the 2008 election and other elections. So the left is organized, the left is motivated, and the only way we can defeat that is to be organized and motivated, and we'll let Anita fill us in on how that's going to work out. But the other thing that we have to be aware of is that if we're not vigilant and if we don't change the law, elections will continue to be stolen from us. So I think we have just a few months to make this law, to end same-day registration, put a reasonable waiting period in, and some sort of proof that you're actually who you say you are, that you live. You know, we need this and a few other things to make sure that there is integrity of the vote. And again, Anita will embellish upon that, but you know, beat up your state legislators and say, why the heck is this not law? You know, we got a Republican governor and a Republican legislature. If they want it, there's no reason it shouldn't be law today. Let's not forget that issue too, because if we don't win this comprehensive voter reform thing, there's very little that we will have the opportunity to win in the future, because the left is motivated, the left is organized, and they've proven that they are of the Machiavellian strain of thought that the end justifies the means. They will lie, cheat, steal to accomplish their goals. And we can't let that happen. Thank you. Todd is going to be up. Todd, of course, is still the interim coordinator of the state of Wisconsin. He can have the job for a while, as far as I'm concerned. He's doing a great job. Todd Welch, take over from here, and I'm off to get Sheriff Mack. I'll see you in a few hours.
Thanks, Ken. I guess I just want to first off start off by thanking everybody for coming here. Great to see some of the finest liberty activists in the state of Wisconsin here today. I think this room represents the best liberty activists that Wisconsin has to offer, and that's saying a lot. So, and even across the entire state. Before we get started with the rest of the activities, though, I just wanted to go over kind of the Campaign for Liberty's 5 main principles that we're all here supporting today. Number 1 is individual liberty. You know, this is the first and foremost thing that we're all here fighting for, because if we don't have individual liberty and we're not free to do things as we decide for ourselves, then we can never truly be free in a free country. Number 2 is constitutional government. Hopefully all of us here have probably read the United States Constitution, and many of us have probably read the state of Wisconsin Constitution. It seems though that most of our representatives have probably not read either of them, and if they have, they just ignore them and tear them apart at every turn. You know, it boggles the mind on how many unconstitutional laws there are going through. You know, Obamacare and just about every other one that they seem to pass has some form of unconstitutional section in it. So together, you know, we got to force our legislators to uphold the Constitution, make sure they obey the Constitution, and if they step and do something that's not in the Constitution, then we have to hold them accountable. And that includes Republicans and Democrats, because you know, we can't just go one party or the other. It's both parties all parties that are screwing things up and doing things unconstitutionally. So we have to hold them all accountable. And that's one thing I think that separates the Wisconsin Campaign for Liberty, or the entire Campaign for Liberty, from a lot of other organizations, is that we will hold everyone accountable. It doesn't matter if you're Republican, Democrat, or whatever. If you do something that's bad and wrong, we're going to bring it to you and hold you accountable. So I think that's one thing that sets us apart. Number 3, sound money. The government and the Federal Reserve are printing tons of money. Well, they don't really print it anymore. They kind of just push some numbers on a computer and send it out to the banks. But they're sending out mass quantities of this money and sending us deeper and deeper into debt every day, causing inflation that's recklessly destroying our economy. The results of it we can see right now. The prices of food are going up. Some of the prices aren't going up, but you'll see that actually the products are getting smaller. So you're getting less for your money, and that's part of inflation. The prices at the pump is part of inflation as well. So we've got news for the government and the Federal Reserve. The free market can only truly work when it's actually free. Any attempts to control it will just kind of screw it up and bring down the economy. Therefore, we must return our economy to a sound currency, something that's based on something such as gold or silver. And if we can do that, it'll return our dollar to a much sounder currency and help us get our debt and inflation levels under control. Audit the Fed by Ron Paul is a great example of this. We've been pushing that for a few years now. Actually, Ron Paul's been doing that for a long time. But thanks to people like you and Campaign for Liberty, most of us have heard of the Federal Reserve and probably have known about it for a long time. But thanks to Ron Paul and the Campaign for Liberty and all of us, now a large majority of the country actually knows what the Federal Reserve is and how destructive their policies are. Number 4, free markets. The governments, they're blaming these recessions on the free market. It's all the free market's fault, the corporations, things like that. But of course, we know that it's actually government regulation, bad policies, and groups like Acorn that are, causing these recessions. And they're causing bankers, actually this specific one, they're causing bankers to give loans to people who couldn't afford it and people that shouldn't have it. That was a large part to what caused this recession that we're currently in. Today, the government's blaming healthcare prices on the evil insurance companies. They forget the fact, though, that all their government regulations and such is actually what's out there stopping and stifling competition in the markets. You can't even buy insurance across state lines, for goodness sake, and but yet they blame the free market on that one as well. One of the freest markets in the United States, the one that I'm in, the technology market, has been one of the freest and most deregulated industries, mostly because they don't understand it. And just look how that's exploded over the decades by the government leaving that alone. But now, of course, they want to limit that and regulate that just like everything else by limiting companies that provide internet. You've probably heard of that recently. They're trying to force internet companies to make their services equal for everyone and not allow them to advance their networks in any way, things like that. So they're coming into the technology market, and that's just going to screw up that as well and slow down the advancement of technology. So one way or another, we've got to stop government interventions, stop the bailouts, unnecessary regulations, end corporate welfare, corporate favors, and anything else that provides special privileges over one business to another or one individual to another. We've got to have an even playing field for everyone and make sure we have a free market. Last but not least, number 5, Campaign for Liberty principle is non-interventionist foreign policy. Again, I think this is something that sets Campaign for Liberty apart from a lot of other groups. A lot of people don't know that we spend literally trillions of dollars overseas every year. We actually have troops in pretty much every country in the world. I think there's only a few of them that we don't have. The government, as we know, claims they're trying to spread democracy around the world, but how can they do that when we hardly even have a working democracy here in the United States properly? Not to mention that we're actually supposed to be a republic rather than a democracy. So, but they claim they're spreading it all over the world when, in fact, they usually have some other reason for it, such as oil or something like that. You only seem to see them going to spread democracy in places that have oil, which is kind of strange. So we've definitely got to stop our expansion of empire and trying to take over all these different countries and supposedly help them form democracies, because if you look back through history, every empire that has overextended itself has crashed. They've fallen, and I think we're on that same path if we don't reel in our foreign interventionists and kind of bring our troops home to protect our country and spread republicanism by example rather than trying to do it by force around the world and being the policemen of the world. So those are the 5 main Campaign for Liberty principles: individual liberty, constitutional government, sound money, free markets, and a non-interventionist foreign policy. Many of our speakers today will address many of these principles and the issues that we face with them and how we can actually work to fix them and reel in our government and get out of this out of control spending, inflation, and things like that. Together, I think all of us the last few years, the Wisconsin Campaign for Liberty is quite young yet. It's only 2.5 years old. But I think we made great strides in that few years. As Thomas Jefferson said, the price of freedom is eternal vigilance. And I don't think that's ever been more prominent and more true than it is right now. You know, while we made some strides, we can never look away. We always got to keep forging forward and holding people accountable. I hope that you're all excited here for the rest of the event that we're going to have. We got some great speakers. I can't wait to hear Acorn whistleblower Anita Moncrief is going to be up next. Sheriff Mack is going to be here. Ken Van Doren is going to run and get him here shortly. And then the Southern Avenger Jack Hunter is going to be here. And if you haven't seen him, he's a fantastic speaker. I think he's going to blow your guys' mind. It's going to be fantastic. So.